Bruh. Hello, gamers. Oh. Ugh, what's happening with Twitch? Yeah. Twitch has been a little bit wonky today. So sometimes my feed just stops. I mean, it's streaming, but I don't see any feedback. Oh well. Hopefully one... Yeah, now it has done it again. What the heck? I bet this is Firefox going nuts. Let me try and see if I can fix this. This is very annoying. Anyway. How is everyone on this fine Monday? Oh, let's see if it stays that way. Oh. Hope everyone had a good weekend. Hi, Georges. Yeah, I'm getting a bunch of new followers every week. It's good. I'm happy. It means that more people are interested in GNOME development and are interested in, well, seeing me talk about it. Yeah, it's a dopamine rush. Got to get that dopamine like injection every single day. Otherwise, how can you monetize the entirety of this platform? Of course, I'm not monetizing anything. Hi, Roddy. Thanks for the follow. Speaking of dopamine rush, I made myself coffee instead of tea today because yeah, not a great night and a little bit of insomnia. And now I need to be present in mind if and spirit, if not in the rest. And I probably ramped it up a little bit. You prefer just chatting category? Yeah, because I mean, it is software development in some cases. Otherwise, it's just writing documentation. Otherwise, it's just me rambling about GNOME development. So, just chatting is, yeah, it's a good category as any. Yeah, it's my sleep schedule has been a little bit fucky wucky in the past few weeks. I go to bed far too late. Yeah, I hope I can write functional code today. Especially because we're gonna write code today, and we're gonna go back to the small application that I'm writing for the developer documentation website. On Friday, I was stumped a little bit by the settings, by GSettings, and well, it turns out it was kind of a mess. between Meson and glib compile schemas and a bunch of other things that makes it really hard to detect if you're making a mistake, which is annoying, but luckily it's easy to solve once you know what the heck is happening, which took me took me a fair chunk of Friday evening and Saturday to understand exactly what was happening. But yeah, kind of annoying. It's it's kind of our problem when it comes to software development inside GNOME. Our tooling sometimes can be very meh because it's too flexible. We need to be able to call a bunch of stuff from different build systems, different environments, different text editors and IDEs and everything else. And the flexibility makes it harder to control the failure conditions, which is a constant. It's literally a constant on our entire body of work. It's also one of the reasons why we try to limit the amount of preferences by limiting the amount of combinatorial explosions in our code base. So yeah, the usual mantra of Linux is about choice, as usual, it assumes that everything goes right, but when something fails, choice is not conducive to fixing the issues, because the amount of failure modes is too big, and the failure modes can be too complex to follow. So in the end, you get into weird states and you have no idea what happened and how to fix it. But yeah, I have a rough idea on how to make this work, but I honestly don't know if it's feasible. And yeah, it would be a lot easier if we didn't have to care about, I don't know, auto tools, or we didn't have to care about random people writing their applications using random tools. Instead, there is the expectation that we fix stuff for everyone, even when their environment doesn't really matter. Yeah, I mean, so the Linux is about choice like thing is an extension of the licensing model that we use, but it's the same mental model that basically says, oh, I can be rude to the waitress, or I can be rude to the person that cleans up the street because they're getting paid for it and I'm using their service. And if I didn't mess up in the middle, if I didn't leave my trash in the middle of the street, or if I didn't go to the cafe and stuff like that, they wouldn't have a job. So they have to do what I tell them to. And that is the mindset. But also it's the, I have no idea how to code. So the freedom that is embedded inside free software, which is the ability to modify the source code and redistribute it, is pointless for these people. It's not freedom at all, because they have no idea how to modify the code to make it do what they want. Or if even they have an idea, then they don't have the time, they don't have the resources to do it, or whatever else. So the way they see it, the way it gets fixed, is creators of this code should provide me with as much configuration ability as possible, as much flexibility as possible, so that I can modify the code without actually modifying the code. I can modify the program to do what I wanted to do without having to touch it. And yeah, assuming that these are paid workers, of course, but we are all paid workers, right? We are all paid in exposure, right? Right? It's the same reason why, oh, the log4j broke, so you have to fix it. And the end result is that, no, these people are not getting paid for anything, but I'm using your software, so clearly I'm paying you in exposure. You'll be able to get a job because I'm using your software. Yes. It's the disconnect. It's the disconnect in their head that makes it extremely funny to me. But it's the mechanism, the underlying mechanism is literally, yeah, if I didn't use this, then you wouldn't be making it, so you have to do what I tell you to, which is nonsensical at best. Yes. Well, I mean, I don't know how many views you make, Georges, but I think you have more than 1,000 followers, right, on YouTube. I hope so, at the very least. So at that point, you can monetize your streams. It could be, I mean, I don't think anybody that does streaming on YouTube or Twitch about free software is going to be able to monetize their work in any way, shape, or form, like really monetize it. But it's also true of people doing Patreons or whatever else, unless you're doing things like, I don't know, you're working on SDL or a bunch of other low-level libraries, you can probably monetize it using Patreon, using donations and stuff like that. But I honestly don't think anybody can do anything else. Oh, hi, Sophies. Thank you for the follow and welcome. But yeah, I it's very hard to actually monetize this stuff. At the end of the day, people get hired in free software. They are not getting paid to do this stuff on their time. And yeah, a lot of people don't understand. Oh, you got hired by this company to work on this project? Great. And no, you get hired to work on the company's project. Oh yeah. Oh, congratulations. $5 last year. It's great. Oh, I right enough. No, there is no commercial support for GTK. Well, there is no actual commercial support. You can ask people to if they are doing contracting work. I can do contracting work, for instance. There are a bunch of companies that do. There are a bunch of consulting companies that they can do contracting work on GTK projects. But the overall, there is no centralized effort that says we're going to offer commercial support to GTK like there is for Qt or other projects. The GNOME Foundation, for instance, doesn't do that. The GNOME Foundation is a non-profit, so it cannot offer commercial support, for instance. We'd have to create a company that does that and do like a Moscow split, like Mozilla does. But yeah, commercial support is literally you go to the people that know how GTK works, and then you pay them if they offer you, if they can do like contract-based work. Yeah, and that applies to the entirety of GNOME, by the way. So that's why a lot of companies hire people in the free software pool, and then they basically take on contracting jobs for these people. GStreamer is probably more to that model. There are more consultancies that work on GStreamer like full-time, and it's usually easier to get commercial support through those companies. But yeah, no, otherwise it's just not gonna happen. I mean, if I don't know, Red Hat hires somebody that from the GNOME community, they're not gonna be like working on GNOME full time. They're gonna work on Red Hat stuff, and then that might happen. Well, most of the time it happens upstream because it's easier, but it's not a given. And same applies to every other commercial company, every other commercial entity that does this. The only time somebody worked full time on GNOME/GTK for somebody that actually didn't make them work on anything else is when I worked for the GNOME Foundation. And let me tell you that it's expensive. You need a lot of money. You're in a year out. So it's not something that happens that often. Unless we figure out a way to make a deal with Google or I have no idea, Facebook or any other FANG, and then we get like $100 million per year or like $200 million per year, and then we can hire a bunch of people to work full-time on GNOME. Yeah, if you have 100 million USD in your back pocket that you're not using, feel free. It would be amazing. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, let's go back to my desktop and the text viewer example. I think we're missing a big opportunity here. We should start demanding users to pay for support. Each personal email, $500. Strictly speaking, yes. I mean, I do approve the fact that we should stop just every bug opened, you have to pay $5. Every comment you leave on a bug is $10. Every emoji that you leave there is $50. And if it's a negative one, it's $100. Yeah, we would be very, very, very rich if we did that. Yeah, it's I mean, yes, we are not doing this stuff. It's very complicated. I mean, I would absolutely do what Elementary is doing. So if you want to have access to the latest build of GNOME, then you can, I don't know, subscribe to the foundation and pay like $5 a month or $10 a month. And if you want to have access to the issue tracker, not to file bugs, but to keep track of what the developers are doing, you can do another subscription. And it's like $20 or something like that. So a subscription model would be interesting. The main problem with that is that we have a ton of people that work on GNOME because they are paid by a company that is currently using GNOME, and that is complicated. So all that money would go to the GNOME Foundation, and the GNOME Foundation would then be in charge of deciding what to do with the donations. But I also imagine the backlash. I mean, doesn't take a lot to see the to imagine the backlash. Elementary has been pelted multiple times because they ask for a donation whenever you download the OS. That's just bonkers. Here, I'm making this entire OS for you for free, and you can have it and you can use it, and doesn't and it's completely open source and everything like that, and you should probably pay a little bit, I mean a donation or something. And it's like, no, how dare you, how dare you suggest I should pay for the software I use. It's hilarious. And then the same people will go on the Humble Bundle and then like drop $50 on a bunch of games, like twice the average, because Linux users are so generous. They are so generous. Thumbs down $5, feature request $30. Yes. Oh no, feature requests are basically just on a contract basis. It depends on how big the feature is. You have to pay $30 just to open a bug request for a new feature. Then the feature gets implemented only if you pay for the time of the developer. That would be hilarious. You want to make it happen without paying? Just write it. Then it's up to you. Oh, by the way, you also have to pay for a code review, of course. Yes, we'll think about it some more. We should like write it down and then send it to the GNOME Foundation as a potential revenue stream. That would be hilarious. Definitely think about that. Okay. Right. So let's go back to our TextViewer application. So on Friday, I was blocked by the fact that the schema setting, the setting schemas that define all the settings keys and default values and types for preferences was not getting installed correctly. Somebody already noticed this on the VOD, but I made a typo here because of copy and paste, and I was using the integer type for the window maximized key and using a default of false, which is a Boolean value. And this is incorrect because false is not the a Boolean value. in theory fits inside an integer as an implementation detail, but in practice the type must be strictly defined, so you cannot use integer, you cannot use I, you have to use B for Boolean. And if we do that, then everything works fine. The main issue is that the typo should be detected by the installation phase, and we should get a failure when installing our schema that would be picked up by GNOME Builder. Sadly, there's a bug somewhere, probably missing, but I haven't checked yet, because I'm running on for this version of Builder and this version of the GNOME SDK. The version of Mason is a little bit older than the current stable, so I haven't actually checked in that branch. I'd have to check with the latest version of Mason to see if it happens again. But basically, the only way to notice if this happens is to run the test suite. So GNOME Builder has the ability to show you all the registered tests inside the build, and one of them is the schema validation test, which is defined in the build system here. So this little bit of Mason code will define a test that runs the glib compile schemas with the strict command line, and also a dry run, so it doesn't try to install anything. But the overall idea is that you can run this bit and see if your schema is correct. So you can go here and it will run the schema, and you will see here that that there is an error here in the validation. You can go here to see the output, and you can see that the validation has failed because this key is invalid. So failed to parse default value of type I, and this is false here. So instead, if we replace it with B and we save it, and then we run the validation again, the validation succeeded. So that error was not easy to debug. So strictly speaking, it's possible to see it if you know what to look for. If you know what to look for inside the unit test, if you know how to launch the unit tests. GNOME Builder also does not have a way to run the build with the tests. You have to do it manually, which I don't think you can do here. Yeah, you have to go into the build directory and blah, blah, blah. There is no quick shortcut to run the tests while building. So right, there is no way to actually do this from the UI. You have to go inside the unit test and then validate everything manually, validate the desktop file, and so on and so forth. And that's the problem. that was the problem that we experienced the other day. Again, I don't know if this has been fixed by the latest version of Mason. Basically, Mason is not showing us the output when installing the when we install here the files. So the schema gets compiled every time we install the file in order to run the build. So it will install the binary and the desktop file. Here the binary, the desktop file, all the, and here we installed the G schema. The main problem when it does this is then we need to run glib compile schemas here. And this one should fail. It should return an error. It should print out an error. And Mason doesn't report that error. It just slurps the standard error or whatever else it's using, and we don't see it, which is annoying. So I'll have to double check if that is broken inside Mason and fix it there, or if we can figure out another way to do this. In theory, if we were not using GNOME Builder and we were building everything from the command line, then you could use Mason test and it will run the test suite as part of the build. But we don't have that option with us. And in theory, GNOME Builder should probably have the same thing. So I have a run option, just like it has a run with bug grind and one run with the debugger. Should probably have a way to build with the tests, or run the test suite first, for instance. Sadly, it doesn't. So anyway, let's go back to adding settings to our text viewer. In this case, we're not just going to be adding settings, we're going to add state saving. So we want to be able to run our application, for instance, resize it, and then close it, and then run it again. And the application should preserve the state that it had when we closed it. So in order to do that, we have to first define the schema for our storage. So we have to define where to store that information. So the window width and the window height, and whether or not the window was maximized. And we have to set default values for that. And after that, we have to go inside our main window and first of all acquire the settings object for that particular schema. So com example text viewer, which is exactly the same we used here. You can ignore the path right now, it's inconsequential for us. So once we have the settings object, we have the ability to store that information for us and also recover it. But for now, we can do this by binding the schema keys to the window properties that we are interested in. So if we go on the documentation for GTK window, let's go. We have a few properties that we want to track. So we have the default height and default width, which map to window width and window height, and window width respectively, and the maximized property. And then we want to go to this, we want to use this function. So it's always possible, if you have a readable and writable property in your object class, to map those properties to GSettings key. This way, we not only can store, but also restore data and we don't have to manually do things like whenever X changes, save it, or whenever you're loading up, get the value from the settings. It's a lot easier to use GSettings bind than it is to use to manually set and get the values from GSettings. So we want to bind actually the key window width on the default width property of the viewer window. And we use default binding. So we could only bind the setting, we could bind the settings so that the property gets only updated when the binding, when the setting is changed. Or we can do the other way around. So set the value on the setting whenever the object changes. But also we can do both. So the get and set behavior is the default one. So we settings bind default. And then we do exactly the same for window right. Strictly speaking, it's not necessary to use bind default because we are not expecting other applications to other tools or other applications to modify the value of the setting when our application is running. So for this case of state changes, we only want the binding set. So we want to store the value of the default width inside the window width key when the default width changes. And same for the default height. But in order to simplify this, we can use the default binding, so we don't have to think about it. And then we also bind the window maximize setting key to the maximize property of the window. There we go. The maximized property gets updated every time the window gets maximized, and so on and so forth. And basically that's it. If you do this, you're essentially just ensuring that the setting that you define in your schema gets updated every time the property gets updated, and vice versa. But once you've done that, let's see. I don't know if I can show you the content of the property, but yeah. Yeah, it doesn't. I don't have access to the sandbox here. Otherwise, I would show you the changes in that. But yeah, this is already storing everything. and restoring it. The main problem is that now we have a default width and default height that are set before the window is actively updated. So let me go inside the UI. So one of the main issue here is that the window gets initialized, but the default size is set in a bunch of places. Okay. Yeah. So it's probably a bug inside the realization code. So windows are sized asynchronously. This is again esoterica of the entire thing. Whenever you create a window, you create the object that represents it, but the actual windowing system surface that sits behind the window, so it's the actual thing that will get put on the screen, is not it's not there yet. It doesn't exist yet. It only exists when the window is realized, when the actual GTK widget is realized. Once the widget is realized, it means that the backing windowing system surface gets created. And in order to set that size, you have to wait until that size is available. Also, I'm running under X11, which complicates a ton of things because it's all asynchronous, and I don't think it has been heavily tested anymore. How would you prevent width height from being saved if the window is maximized? Strictly speaking, yeah. Strictly speaking, GTK understand what maximized is and what the size before maximization also is. So as far as I remember, but I have to double check the code because I forget those details. Whenever you set the maximized flag, the window, the default width and height do not get updated. So you're not, if a window is maximized and you query the default width and default height, you will get the values before the maximization. In order to get the actual width and height, you have to get this with the surface size and not the properties. Let's see. We can also double check in that regard. Oh, all of this stuff is GTK4, not GTK3. GTK3 is a lot more complicated. GTK3 is definitely not going to work this way. So you should never try to apply all of this to GTK3. No. GTK3, you cannot really bind properties to... Well, you don't have properties to bind to the settings. You have to create your own subclass of GTK window, which we're doing, and then override the size allocate. And then overriding size allocation, you can track the size of the window. And yeah, it's a lot more complicated to deal with. GTK4 simplified all of this stuff a lot by giving you properties you can track instead of having, for instance, the maximization. You'd have to track the event, the Windows state event as well. So it's a lot more complicated to do that. For GTK3, the code is, yeah, not at all as easy. We have an entire wiki page about state saving that for GTK3, and it's all a bunch of virtual functions and everything else. You still need that for tile. Yeah, tile states are complicated because they have yeah, you need a lot more information there to get the tiling, and also a bunch of stuff isn't really available in the underlying windowing system backends. Especially for, I don't know, I think X11 is that on X11 you get a bunch of weird property notification shit. Wayland is a lot more cleaner in that regard. Let me double check one thing. Yeah. I honestly don't remember if just so in theory we should be able to do just binding the setting should work correctly, but I may be confusing myself with GObject bind property. So we need to do window set default size. No. Because I don't remember if the settings bind will automatically update the property as well. And maximize here. Never remember if that, yeah. Set default with updated. Right now you can sort of track tile states with notify CSS classes by its suboptimal. Yes, that's a way to do it. Yeah, it's definitely suboptimal. In theory, you want to have a property, but I don't remember if the tiled notification, well, the tile property has more, not only has like a bit mask of values, but if it's more complicated than that, in which case, if it can be represented by single property, if you have to track like 3 properties, then it's going to be hard. Wait. Oh, no, what? GSettings, get boolean. What the heck? Oh, yeah, I am a dum-dum. And I have a path written line. So let's see. This could also be a mess of the sandboxing there. Or it could be a bug in GTK. Who knows? Or in X11. it's so much fun when this stuff happens and you might uncover a pile of bugs that you have no idea where they're coming from. Okay, so instead of doing this, let's go back and do let me move this. Okay. Flags. Okay, we want to update the key whenever the property, no, yeah. So we need to use, we try and use set. So we don't care about that. And then we do this inside the oh, I'm unable to talk today. So, and then we try and do this. We also have to chain up. So oh, it's not mapped. Sorry, I'm confusing myself with the all GTK 3 code. Yeah, GTK 3 also complication had like 3 different map state. What the fudge? Where are you? Oh, yeah. It's widget class. You idiot. Okay. So it seems it's not storing that information. Let's see. This again could very well be a bug in GTK or inside how's it called, the X11 backend. Again, I'm using X11 because I don't want to test the Wayland support in the NVIDIA driver. Right, okay. So it's not storing that information. Okay. That's an interesting thing. Okay. So let's go back a little bit and see. Yeah. Let's get notified by every single change. Okay. So in order to be notified of changes on those properties, we use the notify signal, like we did for the cursor position in the text buffer. So we'll default width, and then also we do the same for and we also do that for the maximized property. And then we go into this. I don't know, we just call it window size changed. Okay, so that's gonna be simpler the way. And the user data. So let's see. If, so it's an intern string, so we can do. Well, let's just do the trivial thing. Name. We get the width if we are not with the width, sorry, default width. And then we print it out. default height. Uh, typo here and typo here as well. The also completion of parentheses is sometimes can be too slow. Oh, okay, we only care about these properties. Okay. We have default width and height of 300 by 600 and it's not maximized, and then we resize and we get the new size. Okay, this stuff should be saved then. And if we maximize it and unmaximize it, we get, yeah. So you can see also that we get the new size, but we don't get the maximized size as the default width and default height. So if we maximize the window, we don't get default width, the size of my screen, and the default height of that as well. So if we restart it though, the size doesn't get stored. So I think this could be a problem in the GSettings. Well, not in GSettings per se, but in the settings of within the sandbox. So the code, technically speaking, should work when unsandboxed. Yeah, it makes it useful. Yeah, the fact that you get a maximized notification and an unmaximized notification without a default size change means that you can just store that information directly without having to go through. I'm going to store only if the maximized flag is unset, because GTK will do that for you. So it's a lot more useful that way. But yeah, I think this can be a problem in how we store the settings for the temporary sandbox that exists for for Builder to work. It's possible that it's not the settings are transient as well, so they don't get stored. Let me see if I can. Yeah. Yeah, I think the sandbox gets recreated and the settings get nuked because we are not using sandbox escape for the binary settings. Instead, we are just storing the settings inside a key file, and it gets blasted away when we save it. So technically speaking, this should work in other ways. This should work outside of the sandbox of GNOME Builder. So if you're running a sandbox for Flatpak, it should work that way. If it doesn't, then if you're inside the Builder sandbox, then it might not work, which is kind of annoying, but sadly it's the result of having everything inside sandboxes upon sandboxes. Plus, again, I'm running the stable version of GNOME Builder. I know that there have been a bunch of changes in the code in the latest version of GNOME Builder, so it should probably be working. I recognize an app ID as a link. Yes. Side effect of using reverse DNS notation. Yeah, in theory, should do inside bar app. Say config. Yeah. So it should store stuff here. But apparently, when running within the separate sandbox, it just goes blah. Again, it could be a bug inside. Yeah. It could be a bug inside GNOME Builder at this point. Because GNOME Builder imposes a entirely different set of like environment variables to redirect everything, so it doesn't install your demo stuff inside your existing system. Because the key file, as you can see, the key file gets stored perfectly fine. But it doesn't update everything else. Again, kind of annoying, but needs to be debugged. But yeah, if you launch it outside of that, I mean, yeah. Let me see if I can get. Where is it? Right. Yeah, it's getting like default width, and I here and here. In theory, it should stay. It should store everything, but yeah, you can see here. No, the settings now are stored. So if I launch it again, no, they're not restored correctly. It's like it's not picking up the yeah. No, map should be fine. Well, even if we're not doing mapped, it should use the init. I mean, it should use the init. Oh, now it's working, for instance. This is weird. Okay. Yeah. This is... I think this is a bug inside GTK, actually. Yeah, I think this is a bug inside GTK. Yeah, yeah, I think it's a bug inside either GTK, the X11 backend, or a global issue. On Wayland, it probably works a lot better, but I think it's a bug inside GTK. We find the bug! Yay! Guess who gets to debug it? Oh, yeah. The side effect of us going all in on Wayland is that X11 sometimes gets completely ignored and stuff breaks. Yeah, in theory, this stuff should be like we're getting property notification here, and we should be saving stuff. So maybe, sorry. So if we do GSettings, that so if we do this manually, let's see what happens. Because it's like we're not getting this is set boolean. We're not getting, I bet that what it is that we're not getting the property notification. And if we don't get the property notification, then the setting doesn't change. What the heck? Yeah. So let's see what happens here. Let's see. Yeah, now the size has changed. So if we do this, yeah, the size doesn't get changed. We are telling it to resize itself, but it doesn't get changed at the end. Yeah. Yeah. With Wayland, would that work? Yes, with Wayland, that would work. Because it's been tested. And I know for a fact that it worked because I used it. But yeah, this is X. It's so what happens is we are setting the size of the window, but the size doesn't get communicated to the windowing system backend correctly, which means that it doesn't get applied. And so we get back the old size and we store it above on top of the existing settings. But everything works as it should when it comes to resetting, like reading the settings and storing the settings. No, that part is definitely correct. But we cannot apply the initial state. So the initial state gets blasted by something else. Right, we get the stored window size at map time. Where is it? Yeah, here. At map, we get the window size and we set the size here, but then it gets reset to the default values, which is 300 by 600. And then it gets blasted again. So this asynchronously gets reset. So that's a bunch of asynchronous code that happens in random places. Right. So if we, let's see, let's drop all of this and do manual setting notification and see what happens. Right? No, we're still. Yeah, the sizes here is fine. But we're still getting this. So it means we're getting the default size from the schema at some point, but we're getting it wrong. Let's see. Yeah, we don't have it anywhere inside, defined anywhere inside our... Oh no, wait, what the heck? It was the template all along. So if we set this here... Yeah, so now we're getting the wrong width and height here, because we had a couple of places where we set the default size, but we're still not getting the correct size at the end. Yeah, this is very annoying, but I bet this is... Yeah, I bet this is an X11 bug, GTK bug on X11. If I had to guess in any way, because the settings are stored correctly, we are getting notification correctly, we are getting the state changes correctly, and we are storing them correctly, but we are not getting them applied in the right place. Yeah, so yeah, our passing default width and height in the constructor for the template is, instead of the UI file, is a bug. So the template, I mean, the GNOME Builder template for GTK4 application, again, this is the old version. It's not the new version. The new version would also use libadwaita by default, for instance, but the template does a couple of things that do not make any sense whatsoever, and should not be done that way. I've been fixing a couple of issues there in the template for the next version of GNOME Builder. I wrote down a bunch of things that needs to be changed anyway. But basically, yeah, that's another thing that has to change if it's still there in the default. You should never hardcode the size of the default size of the window in the code. You should put it inside the UI definition file. And if you're yeah, you should put inside the UI definition file so that you have only one place to store it. All right, no, of course. Now it's not gonna work that way because we're not setting this. We're not setting. So set int. Sorry, G a set default settings. Settings. Window this. Let's see. Now that we have a single source of setting the default size instead of like 25, let's see what happens. Store it this way. Close it. Let's see if it's stored correctly. Yes, it's stored inside the settings. Run it. And now it's working. Oh. Yes. It's a bit wonky in places. I have no idea why. Yeah, we have like... It needs to happen before we create anything. So it needs to happen inside the window init, and then we have to store it somewhere. But also, at this point, let's see if we can rebind our stuff instead. Okay, we're going to do it. On X11 there was a weirdness with shadow and on header bar size as well. Yes, that is expected. That is actually what I expected to happen, because I know there is a bug there. There is a bug in the sizing of the getting the size of the window, because there is some miscalculation with the client side shadows or anything like that. I know there was a bug there, and I kind of expected that to happen. And I had all the stuff prepared for that. Again, Wayland works a lot better. So let's comment out this stuff. And yes, now it's working. So it was generated code messing up stuff. Use it 11. Yeah, this is how I expected it to work. Right. Okay. Oh, geez. Yes, this is why you should never hardcode values inside your source code. You should always encode it inside UI definitions. Otherwise, you end up chasing bugs all over the place. Now let's just use set instead of default. Oh no, we need to use default because otherwise the value won't be set at startup. Yep. So if we maximize it and we close it, run it, it doesn't maximize. Nice. This is another X11 issue, I bet. Initial state. Yeah, it's always fun to get all this multiple backends issues popping up. Anyway, but right, if you're using Wayland and likely sandboxed inside your own sandbox, and also if you're using the correct template instead of using the old one, don't worry, I'll try to fix it as soon as I can. For at the very least for the next version of GNOME Builder, it will be okay. Binding properties on objects to keys inside GSettings is the easiest way to have your your state saved. And it's not just Windows state, it's in general any state you have. Even though it's not technically speaking a setting, so it's not a preference. At the very least for sandboxed applications, all this stuff gets hidden away inside a key file, inside your configuration directory. But for global stuff, for non-sandboxed application, this all gets stored into GSettings, the user database for settings, which is kind of annoying, because it's pointless, to be fair. The entire GSettings API is predicated on the idea that you define your settings as a schema and then you install them inside a global location so that other tools can look at the settings of your component and then can read it, modify it, but mostly read it. This is absolutely fundamental for system components. It's also the reason why the database is a binary blob that can be mapped by the kernel instead of being a plain text file. It's because when you're starting up your environment and you have multiple components reading the same settings that are like global to the system, you don't want contention, especially on spinning Rust drive, so on spinning hard drives. On SSDs is a little bit different, but on spinning hard drives, it makes if you stored every single setting inside a plain text file and you had multiple components at startup reading the same files, it would make your startup slower. Oh, hello, Jeff. And I'm saying this, it would make it the startup slower because we literally measured it. We measured it during GNOME 2, early GNOME 2. Back in that day, we used a tool called gconf instead of GSettings. Gconf had a single daemon for reading and writing the settings, so every single operation was centralized to avoid breaking the database of settings. And the settings were stored inside XML files. And XML file, it was a single XML file for, so it was structured like GSettings. So you have here, you have a path like this and a key at the end. And if you had like org GNOME, I don't know, panel, and then a bunch of settings, a bunch of keys there, you would have a XML file for every component of the path, and then one containing the keys for that element of the path. And the way it worked, it meant loading a bunch of XML files, which is fine if all your XML files are touched at the same time. So if they reside close to each other because they've been created pretty much at the same time, but they are user settings. And if they're user settings, the kernel will, well, the hard drive will store them in a bunch of places, right? So if you store them in a bunch of places, it means you have to move the head of the hard drive to find them. And if you have a ton of XML files, then you have to move a ton of times the head of the drive, which means slow access time. And if you have to do that for reading as well as writing, then you are basically screwed. So one of the things that we did back in the day of early GNOME 2 was literally taking all the separate XML files and consolidate them into a single one. So we had a massive XML file. That reduces the access time, but you still have a massive XML file, so which can go completely out of date, and it's harder to control. So, and also it's harder to parse. The bigger it is, the more you have to load it in memory, parse it, and then generate all the data. Which is why the entire thing was modified into what is now known as dconf. And dconf uses a binary blob. And you use a binary blob because then we can tell the kernel, please page this file into memory so that every single process that tries to access that file will have it already. It will be faster to access because the kernel will basically cache it for us. And every time the file changes, all the processes that have it open will get a notification and they will be able to reload it instead of getting a file notification, watching the file on the file system. So every time somebody says, oh, GNOME is using a binary blob for storing their settings, it's like, yes, because we don't want your session to start really, really slowly, and we want to have certainty that the data is consistent every single time. So every client, instead of going through a daemon to read the data, will just read the memory mapped file and then build the entire setting, like not the entirety, but only the subsection of the settings that you're interested in. So for instance, com example text viewer. So we read that particular blob for us. And we know that it's always valid because every single write goes through a daemon that serializes all the multiplexes all the write calls. So we only have one write for everything. If you have multiple calls to set a bunch of keys, then we coalesce them into one and we write it atomically. So again, this is why the entire thing is a binary blob. But again, this is for settings, for system settings. For system settings, it's important to have that because startup, and also because there are multiple components that will read the same settings, and there are a bunch of system components that will write those settings, but fewer writers than readers. For applications, especially sandboxed, especially when sandboxed, it doesn't really matter because only the application will touch the key file that stores the settings when sandboxed. So we don't care. Which is why sandbox applications used a simple ini style key value pair file. So this was a little bit of a history lesson and a little bit of technical description of the problem space and the solution that GNOME employs. But it's always very annoying when you read people saying, "Oh, GNOME is like the Windows. GNOME is using something like the Windows registry, so it's bad." It's like, no, no, we are not. Well, we kind of like R for some stuff, but to be fair, if you want your session to be slow and you want all your applications to be slow, then feel free. But you don't have to live. I mean, you don't have to live like this. You can. There are better solutions. Okay. So, okay. We've seen the settings there. Let's see if we can get something else going for this example. So one of the things that a lot of applications in GNOME these days have is the let's see, is this selector for using the system or falling to dark style or light style. This is not this widget particularly, but the functionality is provided by libadwaita, and it's kind of important. It's one of the things that is going to be a centerpiece of GNOME 42. So if you want your application to support the global dark and light themes, you should use libadwaita, of course. But you might have an application that wants to support the dark theme by itself. I am not going to copy this widget here because it's a lot of work. You can literally copy it from GNOME text editor, or I think a couple of other applications started having it. Like I think GNOME To Do maybe has it. Yeah, having a libadwaita would be nice. I assume there are a bunch of issues there for accessibility as well to be. Also, this one is a custom widget. It's not something that it's entirely easy to add to a menu. So it's not going to be something that can be defined by an attribute like we do for everything. Oh, there was a mockup that also had a sepia mode like apostrophe. Oh yeah, no, yeah. If you have additional custom styles, it's going to be a mess. So instead of having this, I was thinking about having a simple switch that is dark theme. Dark mode. Let's call it dark mode instead. And in order to do that, we really want to go here. Menu button. There should be a where are the menus? So there should be a way to define the menu, the popover menu. Right, okay. Let's see. So we should be able to set a Boolean. Let's see. So we have to go into the tutorial for our actions. Where are you? States. Okay. So actions have, they can be completely stateless. So they are essentially the same thing as an actual action like quit or open. They don't have any state. But some actions instead can be represented by a state parameter, so like a Boolean state. They can be, a good example here is a full screen action. So you know that the action is going to be you're either full screen or you're not, and you want to have a notification of that. So yeah, toggle action. Let's see if I can get an example here. I don't see an example. Let me see if I can find an example somewhere so we can actually see. I can actually show you. Okay, project. Let's see in GTK. I don't have it installed. Let's see. Yeah, I don't have it. The application example should have them. Let's see. Where are you? It's the GDK demo application. Let's see if I can find the. There we go. Okay. So yeah, this is an example of an action that has a state. So here the activate toggle, let's see if I can, will take forever to build, so I can explain it. So action entry, the actions can have a state. So in this case, the activate toggle action, well, the dark action has a false state by default, and every time it changes, you get here a state argument to the callback. And your role in that case is to set the state of the action. Again, the documentation of GAction inside the tutorials explains why you have to set the state on that you receive, and so on and so forth. The short version is that all the actions are abstract, but simple actions are the implementation of that abstract type that is the action interface. So you get a notification that an action has changed, but you have to store the state yourself. You have to decide whether or not to store the state yourself. But generally speaking, that's what you do. Let me see if I... this one is going to take forever and ever to build, but it's fine. We don't have a shared cache of the build. So the end result is that I usually build everything in a separate cache, and then building inside Builder takes a while because the cache is different. But yeah, let's see if I can go straight to the text viewer. So we have a dark mode here. Wait, I need to find the where are you? That demo application class. The XML application demo menus UI. Okay, the file is here. Right. There you go. So we define the action as just as we define every other action inside our menu. So we define a label, and then we define an action here. It's pretty much the same. The way we implement it, though, it's different. So we have to go here inside our, and then we do G simple action. And we need to here simple action. Whenever we construct the simple action, we need to actually new stateful. That is a lot easier to see. So we need to have stateful action. So we need to use this, and we have to specify the parameter type and the state, the initial state. So want to see the follower goal today beyond 120? It would be nice. It would be nice, but yeah. I might be choking a little bit on the bit rate. I don't know if you can see it. It could be, yeah. I don't know if it's a problem on my end or it's a problem of how's it called, of OBS or Twitch. Who knows? Oh yeah, let's see, application class. No. Launch it. Right. So this is a case of a stateful. Right. So we basically want to do something like this. This should be fine. Okay, so let's go back here. Dark, it's a Boolean, and and then you probably get away with that with widget class install property action. Not really, because this is a global action and it's installed on the application instead of being installed on the window. In theory, yes. I mean, there are a couple of things. There are a couple of there are a couple of ways you can do things in GTK4. In case of the property action installed on the widget class, you can define ways to create a simple to create an action attached to to a widget, and that is usually useful for things like key shortcuts, because then the shortcut can activate the action and the action can then update the UI, for instance. In this case, we already have a UI and we don't want to do anything more complicated than that. So go back here, application, dark, and then we add the action to the application. And we add it here. So we can also do that. We can look back at how GTK does it as well. If we go back to the application demo, here. So the application demo in GTK uses the C convenience API to define a bunch of actions and a bunch of callbacks. This makes it a little bit more compact, but not as easy to understand what's happening. I'd say this is advanced C. It's also C only. This functionality is not available to language bindings. So language bindings would have to create the action themselves. But yeah, basically it checks if there is a state the action entry API defines a bunch of action names, the callback to be called whenever the the action changes and gets activated. Then it takes the initial state, and then whenever the state changes, it also calls another callback. See if I can get activate toggle. Yeah. So you have to do two things. The first one is you have to activate the toggle here, and then change this. So the activate toggle is what you call with the activate signal. Let's see if I can get the documentation up so that you can see what happens. So you have two things you have to do. The first one is the activate. And the parameter you get is inconsequential. It's not important. That's not the important thing in a stateful action. Whenever you activate it, you have to get the current state of the action, and then you have to call GAction change state. And in this case, we change state by flipping a Boolean value here. So we have to do exactly the same here. So we got activated. So we can just copy this because it's exactly the same, minus the show action dialog because this is not important. We get the state of the action and we change it to a new value by flipping the Boolean state. So activate is phase one, and then we have phase two, which is connecting to the change state signal. And phase two is featuring. Let's see. Let's copy this. In phase two, we perform the action that is necessary by checking the value of the state. So again, we can go here. Where is it? Yeah, here. In this case, this one calls directly the GTK setting API, but we don't want to do that. But you can see we get the new state, so we get the Boolean value out of the state. So mode let's just print it right now. Typo. Right. So, all right, we passed the wrong value here. Okay, it's going to be need to double check. Yeah. Ugh, annoying. So, stateful. This one should be fine. Why is it not doing the right thing? No, this one, yeah, this one should be no, because it's a stateful but not parameterized. You have stateful actions which have an internal state like this, but you also have parameterized actions. So, for an example, if you have a group of actions that have, well, if you have an action that can have multiple values, like, well, no, sorry, if you have a group of actions, let's say, instead of creating one action, one simple action for each group, for each element of the group, you can have a single action with a parameter. The parameter can be like a specialization. The example inside the documentation is the text justify action. So instead of having a text justify left, text justify right, and text justify center, for instance, 3 different actions, you can have a single action, text justify, with a parameter that is right, left, and center. And that is different from a Boolean state because the action, a parameterized action, for instance, doesn't have a state. It only has a parameter. So you're not storing whether or not the action is right, left, or center. You are telling the application that the action text justify right has been invoked. So actions have are either stateless or stateful, and can be parameterized or not parameterized. The very simple actions, like quit, is stateless and non-parameterized. Then you have stateful actions like preferred dark mode or full screen or whatever. They are not parameterized, but they are stateful because they have an inherent state that has to be maintained. And then you have parameterized actions that have a parameter that gets passed to the action itself. Oh yeah, of course. I didn't add any. Yeah, this is gonna be app. Yeah, it's gonna be here. Where is it? The UI. Yeah, it should be app dark mode. It should not be wing dark mode, but it has to have the same name. It's not dark. It's dark mode. So we press it, and we have here dark mode, yes. But also, I should update the state. Okay. Yeah, because we didn't change the state. Okay. We have to set the state. As I was saying, you not only have to set state, right? So you not only have to, you get the new state here as an argument, but you also get to save the state inside the action, because at that point, the UI will change here. Otherwise, nothing will change. So it's kind of complicated. This should really be a tri-state for, yeah, it should be a tri-state. So in theory, it should not be like Boolean like that. It should be a map, but I wanted to show the easiest way right now, and then we can go to the tri-state, because what we want to do. So let's start with an easy Boolean, and then we're gonna go to the tri-state version. So what are we gonna do with this? Well, for one, we have to go inside the libadwaita after the documentation, and then we have to look at the where is it? The style manager. So to change from the current system default to I want an explicit dark style, we have to use the style manager inside libadwaita. So and in order to do so, we use the singleton instance of the style manager. And then we tell it to use the correct color scheme that we want. So if dark mode, then we call style manager with the color scheme preferred dark, well, forced dark in this case. Color scheme. Otherwise, we tell it to use the system default. So libadwaita color scheme default. So we build it, and voila. The end result is that we now can switch between dark mode and default mode. In this case, my default is light. But yeah. So in practice, though, it's not the style mode is not going to be dark. It should be tri-state here. Because we want the default, we want the preferred light, and we want the preferred dark options. We also may want to have the what's called scheme. We want to also have the high contrast option, so we want to have another stateful action that contains whether or not the high contrast mode should be visible or not, should be used or not. And it works exactly the same way. This one is a little bit of a hammer. You either get the default or the dark style. But for instance, if you have the dark theme already, this one won't do anything for obvious reasons. And that is why the here the widget is more complex than simply having a switch, a toggle between two states, because we have I prefer the dark one, I prefer the dark style, I prefer the light style, and I want to use the system style. So it's slightly different. It's more complex, let's just say. But this is a first approximation of how to do dark mode for your application using the libadwaita API. Yeah, if we want to have this, instead of a dark one, we have high contrast. We can reuse the same function. So we don't have to do let's see. Here. What is the practical difference between preferred dark and forced dark? Yeah, I'll let Alex explain it, but preferred dark, yeah, can be light if the system set preferred is preferred light, and forced dark is enforce the dark, no matter what the system is. It's a layered set of choices because the system could be set to prefer the light theme, prefer the dark theme, and then the application can define its own layer on top of that. So since we are in this case forcing this, we're not telling it to prefer the dark theme, then we're actually forcing it, regardless of what the style around it is. Let's see, this one we can rename it to toggle, so we can reuse the code, and then we can have a copy of this for the high contrast. And for high contrast, we're going to use here. Oh, setting the high contrast is... Wait, why is it not allowing me to set the high contrast? Alex? It should allow me to set the eye contrast. Oh, the application don't control eye contrast? Oh yeah, it's an accessibility. Yeah. Yeah, it's an accessibility option, so it doesn't have a user toggle. So yeah, we cannot add it here. I got confused with the inspector toggle. That is absolutely correct. But yeah. Input. Yeah. Okie dokes. Oh, okay. Yeah, the inspector simulates a system setting. Yeah, it's a system setting. The applications cannot toggle them. So we cannot have an option for that. But I guess the switching to the dark mode is kind of enough. And then whenever the system changes to enable high contrast, the entire thing will change by itself. And we don't have to deal with that. And yeah, you can get a notification by where is it? Yeah, you can add and notify high contrast signal callback on the style manager to know if the high contrast setting was enabled inside the system, so you can track, for instance, style classes that you might have added, which is useful for your custom styles. But yeah, I think we can. Where is it? Here. Yeah, when I'm going to write the documentation for this, I'm not going to be using Boolean here. I'm going to use what's it called? A tri-state or a more complex widget. It's just that writing a complex widget is kind of a pain. I'd also have to check out TextExecute does it so I can do it the right way until a custom widget lands in libadwaita. Yeah, I wanted to add more well, not options, but preferences to this demo here. The main problem is that it's a text viewer. It doesn't need options. It really doesn't. I don't want to add options there. It's kind of pointless. I mean, I already added a dark mode option, and it's way above and beyond what I would normally do to an application at this point. I don't want it to balloon to like an email client. That would be so bad on so many levels. But yeah, I mean, the entire point of this exercise is to identify the steps in which we should document how to get started with an application, writing an application, starting from builder generating the skeleton of the application from its template. Of course, that requires a couple of changes inside the template itself, which is on my to-do list. But the other thing that requires some changes, well, the changes that are required are mostly simplification to avoid future mess. For instance, the fact that the application will create the application will create a new window using a default width and height hard-coded. It's a bug in the template, ostensibly. It's not what you would do normally. So we start from a working template and then we add functionality to it until we get to a point where we can ship the application. And in order to do so, yeah, there are a couple of things to fix inside GNOME Builder itself. Well, the templates provided by GNOME Builder itself. But after that, it's mainly a case of adding stuff. So adding widgets to our application here, entries in the menu, and then adding the business logic, for instance, of loading data from a file or creating file selection dialogues, updating the UI whenever the state of the the state of the application whenever the state of the UI changes. For instance, when the cursor position changes, we update the UI to display where the cursor is inside the main UI, and so on and so forth. Also, whenever a a synchronous operation runs or terminates, like for instance, we want to save an empty file in this case, and we pop up something that says, wait, you have nothing to save, so there's nothing you can do here. Or whenever you open a file, you print it out, and again, so on and so forth. So basically isolate every single step and then build a short tutorial on what we have been doing, which means the less rambling version of these streams. Do we get an Easter egg somewhere in GNOME 42 with a reference to Hitchhiker's Guide? Even if we did, I would not be able to tell you, otherwise it would be a very poor Easter egg. Also, people don't tell me this stuff because I'm terrible. I usually spill the beans pretty quickly. So if somebody added it, I don't know. Would be nice. I'm not entirely sure. The opportunity is golden. Yes, it is. It's a golden opportunity for adding Easter eggs about the answer to the question. Right. So yeah, essentially what I'm going to do next is going to be going through each of the things we've done in the stream over the past week or so, isolate them into separate tutorials that get linked from the getting started section with screenshots and everything else, and reconstruct everything I've done so it's possible to basically just follow along and see what happened. And at the end of the process, you should have the same applications that the same application that we have here ourselves. So it's essentially rebasing a set of commits on top of, well, following along a set of commits. So we know, so somebody that wants to start with a new application can follow along and at the very least understand how GNOME applications are put together. And how to use GNOME Builder, how to use Meson, how to use the template that Builder provides, how to test the application, and so on and so forth. Right, let's move back to my face. So I am not going to be streaming on Wednesday because I'm otherwise engaged. So I'm gonna skip that. I don't think I'm going to do a stream on Tuesday and Thursday, mostly because Georges is gonna stream on those days, and also because it's going to be too compressed otherwise. On Friday, though, I plan to basically have an outline of the getting started tutorial ready, so we can fill out the details there. And I'm probably gonna work on it during the week, so I'm not gonna be writing heavily on writing it on Friday itself. Probably gonna go over it on Friday on stream, but not spend too much time on it. On Friday, I want to go back to the tagged entry widget though, because I've seen, well, the merge request has been open for a week or so now, and there is feedback from Alan, there is feedback from Alex, which means going over it and figuring out how to address the issues raised during review. But also there are a bunch of open questions still, so maybe experiment a little bit. For instance, with the position of the tags, whether or not the tags should actually exist inside the text, or how they should exist inside the text, and whether or not they should have additional content, for instance, small images or not, like whenever you complete an address inside an email client like Gmail, or on Android applications, It's not entirely possible with GTK text, but I mean, a trick would be whenever you complete an existing, like for instance, you're entering an email address. The email address is resolved to an existing contact. Then we put the address at the beginning of the entry instead of in the middle. Whereas right now, I think in Gmail, you can have like completed contacts interleaved with unknown context. So you have the text and then contact like pill, and then some text and then a contact pill, and so on and so forth. Whereas that is possible to do with a text view, for instance, because you can embed widgets. Even though I would never actually do that. With GTK text is not possible unless you do a completely custom widget. Yeah, I mean, having it at the beginning would work. It would probably not be great for like to do live text editing. For instance, if you add a contact and you add an email address and it resolves to a contact, and then you press backspace, you delete the contact. So if you have interspersed contacts and plain email addresses, then you can edit them as you would any piece of text. Whereas if you put them at the beginning, so if you coalesce them at one of the edges of the widget, then you would need to delete them using your pointer instead of your keyboard. Though it's possible to press, I don't know, backspace, for instance. Whatever. If you go at the beginning and you press backspace, you delete the contact you added last. It's possible. It's possible to do. I have no idea how the user interaction would work, if it would work well enough for that. It needs to be tested. It needs to be user tested at the very least. So that's a possibility. I don't know. But again, it's one of the open questions that you want to try out before you actually commit to it. But yeah. And yeah, also that affects the style, because now you have to have like an icon inside the pill box that is big enough to be recognizable. So it's not a tag anymore, or at least it's a tag-ish. But yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to use it as the Fractal chat entry because, well, you wouldn't use it for Fractal anyway, because Fractal allows you to have multi-line text entry, and GTK text is a single line text entry. So you wouldn't be able to use a tagged entry for that. But yeah, there are a bunch of possibilities there, here and there, like having a replacement for search entry that allows you to have tags, for instance, instead of having a tagged entry widget for that, and then having a separate widget that has the ability to pack contacts style stuff there, and doesn't have it doesn't have like a lot of text editing capabilities. Basically, you start typing, and if it matches something that exists in a model somewhere, then it replaces what you just typed with a tag-ish. And it packs it at the trailing or the leading edge of the entry. So it's a different it's a different widget, type of widget. So maybe we don't need a tagged entry, we need a bunch of entries that allow you to have embedded widgetry there at the edges, and allow you to add stuff and remove stuff in there. Don't know. I mean, again, that's why I started this entire thing. It's not that I have answers for that. I've seen a potential use case because we've been using a similar approach in multiple applications. So again, maybe we don't need a single widget. Maybe we need multiple widgets that cover separate use cases. Which is one of the advantages of libadwaita at this point. We can iterate over the API and figure out if we need them, and if different applications have different use cases, then we can add and remove widgets a little bit easier than GTK itself. Anyway, I think we are at a good point where we can close this. So again, on Friday, because I'm going to skip Wednesday, and on Friday I'm going to be doing a roundup on the documentation for the Getting Started tutorial, and then look at the tagged entry in libadwaita and figure out what to do with that. For everyone who's been watching this on YouTube, consider subscribing to my channel for watching the VODs on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Well, not this Thursday, but on Tuesday and Saturday in this case. Otherwise, if you want to watch this stream live, you should follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/ebasi, and you will see me struggle with the documentation and the coding of GNOME applications for writing documentation. For everyone here, have a great rest of your day and a great rest of the week until we meet again on Friday. Bye.